Okay, we continue now in Jeremiah 25. We are talking about, I'm sorry?
Your mic is on?
I presume it is. I don't speak in a mic, so you can hear me. The microphone on the computer is hearing me. As far as I know, I never know fully when my computer, this is the modern way of things, you've probably experienced it, when my computer wants to update the software on there. And I usually don't give it permission because it annoys me. Because they're watching what I do. When they update, they're looking, they're examining all the stuff that I have done on my computer, and that's violating to me. So I usually don't say yes. But if I don't say yes, if I go long enough without giving it permission to update, then it begins shutting down stuff. And so it turns off the microphone, and then I'll get up and preach, and I hit record when I start. But it's not recording because the microphone is turned off.
I see.
And it makes me mad. You yanked my string. This week, they're trying, meaning the technological minds that are trying to socially engineer our behavior, they want to get away from music CDs. They want us to go to where all our music is streaming on the internet. We don't have records and tapes and CDs anymore. And so when they update my computers, they have this computer, my newest computer that the church got me less than a year ago, does not have a CD player on it at all. As they make computers now, they're not putting CD players on them anymore, DVD, CD players. So I went to my old computers. I went to the last one I had the last 5 years, my first 5 years here, and they had removed my CD player software, or disabled it. And I turned it back on, and then they disabled it again. I went to my computer that I got in 2010, that I did my PhD on, my dissertation, and it also did not have a thing. And so I got on the internet, and so we're up to Windows 11, I think, now, for the program that operates it. That computer was Windows 8. I said, my DVD player is not working on my Windows 8. And a guy gave me a thing, he said, go to command prompt, or a thing came up on the internet. And so I went in, the inner workings, the programming on my computer, and I typed in this big, long piece of code, computer code. And well, all of a sudden, and then I cut it off the internet so I couldn't do it again. All of a sudden, my CD player started working, and I could listen to CDs. Am I the only one that has a problem with me buying something, and then the company that sold it to me making stuff not work on it?
That's intentional.
That is intentional. And the phones, you know how phones will do stuff, and then all of a sudden they'll stop doing it? That's so you'll go buy a new phone. It's like, 50 years ago, a guy showing up and going out to your tool shed and sawing 3/4 of the way through taking your shovel and sawing 3/4 of the way through the handle. So that the next time you use it, it breaks and you have to go buy a new one. I mean, to me, it's criminal, but it's legalized criminal. When you say you agree with terms and conditions, say you can steal this back from me. I'm paying for it, but you can have it back when you choose to. Anyway, let's get back to the Bible. That's my rant for today. That'll go out on the internet, and they'll mark me down as a troublemaker now. So sooner or later, they'll come get me, I think. Anyway, let's get to the Bible. Jeremiah forecasts a lot of stuff. And truly, we could not imagine when we were kids and heard the book of Revelations, we could not imagine lots of things that it said and how they would know stuff. Well, we know now, don't we? We know how they're going to know what we spend money on. When they said you will need a mark in order to purchase things, to buy and sell, that didn't make any sense to us, but it certainly does, doesn't it? So God knows what he's doing. let's look at the 70 years of desolation. So in Jeremiah, they haven't gone into captivity at this point. It's a very important thing. It starts out giving us very specific dates for when these things are happening, because this is an important chapter here. But it does talk about the 70 years of captivity at this point. So Jeremiah 25:1, the word that came to Jeremiah concerning all the people of Judah hasn't happened yet, but it's going to happen soon. This is 605, 604 BC, as we'll see in a minute. We're going to talk about the exact dating of this. There's a little controversy about that. We are still, so there is a small deportation in 601, so that's 3 or 4 years from now. Then another deportation in 597, so that's about 7 years from when this was written, after this is written. And then the really big deportation is 586 BC. And so that's going to be what, 18 years later. So just getting the timing. So concerning the people of Judah, in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, Jehoiakim is is the daddy of Jeconiah. So this is the fourth son of Josiah. Okay? And his brother Jehoiahaz was taken by Necho down to Egypt and put in prison, and Necho put Jehoiakim in as king. Okay? It was in the 4th year of his reign, the son of Josiah, the king of Judah, and then it gives us a little parenthetical statement, which is the 1st year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. And they reckon things by how long the kings had been king. Prior to this is the 1st year for Nebuchadnezzar, so we're at 604 BC, and we are within 18 years of the collapse of Judah, right? Before this, Nebuchadnezzar's daddy had been the king of Babylon, and his name was Nabopolassar. And so Nebuchadnezzar is a brand new king, a prince. He has been a prince of Babylon. So Jehoiakim, which Jeremiah the prophet had spoke to all the people of Judah and to all the inhabitants of Jerusalem, saying. Now, I want to focus on the dates before we go on with what Jeremiah says, because the import of this message, the date, a very specific date is given, and there's a little controversy about it. It says the 4th year of Jehoiakim. We know when that is. In the 1st year of Nebuchadnezzar. We know when that is. And there is about a year discrepancy between the two. So that's a problem. Jehoiakim's, his 4th year began in April of 605 BC, and Nebuchadnezzar's 1st year began in April of 604 BC. So that's a big problem, isn't it? The Bible is lying to us. No? That can't be the answer, can it, Faye? What's going on? Well, as always, I say it a little bit facetiously, but this is the kind of thing that people like to find, people that don't want the Bible to be inspired by God, to be a living word, a divine speech. They find issues like this and they make them really important. Well, it's not, those dates don't line up, so the Bible is either lying intentionally or it's ignorant. Either way, how can it be inspired by God and not get that right? Well, let me tell you a couple ways. And so ultimately, and this is the truth is, I cannot answer every question about the Bible. Nobody can. And there are discrepancies and apparent contradictions that will never be, this side of the heartbeat will never be answered. I very much believe when the veil of sin is lifted, everything the Bible says will make absolute and perfect sense to us. I really do. Just the clarity of that. So one solution, and probably it's a combination, there's two solutions to this problem. The word that is translated into English, understand this was first written most likely in, it was probably written in the Babylonian script of the Hebrew language, the ancient Hebrew language. And it has been translated into Aramaic, Syriac, Greek, Latin, all kind of things before it was translated into English. That's been a recent thing that's happened in human history, in the history of this text. And so the where it says the first year of Nebuchadnezzar, the word there is Rashid. All right, we're familiar with the word Rosh Hashanah. That is the Jewish New Year. And what Rosh literally means is the head, the top. This is my Rosh. Each of you have one on top of your shoulders. That's your Rosh. All right, so that's not literally your first. That's the top. That's the beginning. In the beginning of the Bible, the very first word is in, ba, and then Rashid, Barashit. And we translate it there, in the beginning, God created. But here, that same word is translated in the first year. All right? The easiest solution, and probably what's going on here, is the translator has chosen to translate it as the first year of Nebuchadnezzar, but it says in the beginning years of his reign. At the beginning of his, when he first became king, is what it's meaning to say, rather than a technical, this was this day and this was this specific day. So that's one approach to solving what seems to be an inaccuracy. The second one has to do with the nature of the Jewish calendar. Rather than going from January to December, as we're familiar with, their calendar goes from October to September. And so Nebuchadnezzar's first year, the first year that he reigned, began during this calendar year of the fourth year of Nebuchadnezzar, but they're not lined up exactly. Sarah and I, when we say we have been married now 23 years, we are in our 24th year of marriage, July, but we're not in. You can't go by we were married in 2000. If you went just by the calendar year, in a couple weeks when it's 2023, that would say we've been married 24 years and we haven't yet. You see how there's a discrepancy between the actual dates and the calendar years? That could also explain this, that Nebuchadnezzar's first year began towards the end. It was at the beginning of his first year, at the end of Jehoiakim's fourth year. Okay? Now some people that matters a lot too, so I took the time. Stuff like that doesn't bother me that much. Also, always remember that modern people have different set of priorities when they read things that they want to be communicated precisely than ancient people did. Ancient people expected, when they said there's a million guys out there, that was saying there's a bunch of people, not that it was saying there's exactly 1 million people out there. Modern people like a higher level of exactness in numbers. And that's because we're in a scientific age, and science is based on precise measurements. Anyway, and so it's a philosophical difference we have. But people expect to read a document like the Bible that is 3,000 years old, and for them to use modern standards of precision for how they account things. Anyway. So going on to verse 3, Jeremiah, the Lord sang, from the 13th year of Josiah, king of Judah, son of Ammon, even unto this day, this is the 23rd year. This is for Jeremiah. This is his 23rd year of prophecy. 23rd year in which the word of the Lord has come to me. Okay? So Jeremiah at this point, in 604 BC approximately, has been a prophet for 23 years. And things have gotten worse and worse and worse. Just as a frame of reference, Josiah has been dead about 5 years. He died in 609 BC. And so he died, I think Jeremiah overlapped with Josiah about 18 years. And I have spoken to you, rising early and speaking, but you have not listened. So God is saying, Jeremiah is saying, you haven't listened. He's talking to the people of Judah. You're not listening to what I've said and what God has told me. And the Lord has sent to you all his servants, the prophets. Isaiah, Amos, all those guys, rising early and sending them, but you have not listened, nor inclined your ear to hear any of the prophets. You have continued to do what you want. You have listened to the sermons, and then you have left church, and you've gone and done what you wanted to once you got home. Does that sound familiar? These prophets said, repent now, everyone from his evil ways and doings, and dwell in the land that the Lord has given you and your fathers forever and ever. If you are obedient to God, you will dwell there in peace and safety. Do not go after the other gods to serve and worship them. Do not provoke me, speaking about God, do not provoke God to anger with works of your hands, that is, making your own idols to worship. The product of you generate the things that you worship. And worship them, gods to serve and worship them. Do not provoke me to anger. I will not harm you. So if you stop doing these things, I won't punish. Yet you have not listened to God. He is saying me through the prophet Jeremiah, that you might provoke me to anger with the works of your hands and to your own harm, to your own hurt. So you keep poking God by doing what you want to and not repenting, and you're causing yourself harm, okay? I find the Bible, the intention of the Bible is to let us know that God is just. I have on quizzes, when I give quizzes a lot in my class, because, the kids don't want to read the Bible no more than people that come to church want to read it. And so I give them a quiz. I can't do it to y'all. I guess I could. But to them, I write a little quiz when I say read this passage, and then I'll give them a quiz on it, to get them to read it. And I have them write, I say, if you write me a good question about something about the Bible, something about theology, if you write a good question on your quiz, I'll give you an extra point. And what's funny is I have 4 or 5 every semester that just about every quiz they'll write a question on there, and they just stack those points up. But most of the kids, they can't even bother to ask a question, to get points. Anyway, a little girl asked me, she said, I have a friend that says they just can't worship a God who sends people to hell. And so, I gave a big, long answer to it because, I know people have that. And in the end, I summed up my answer and I said, the Bible assures us that God is just, and there will never be anybody in hell that doesn't deserve to be there. And we got to remember that. Everybody, modern people, as we begin not to fear God at all, and that's the modern trend. Don't fear God. Don't worry about Him. It's up to you, God, to prove that we've not been good enough. It's not. It's not God's job to prove that we've not been good enough. We do that for ourselves. No innocent people will go to hell. So when you worship other gods, you cause your own punishments. They are consequences. They are not God striking you for no reason. Nebuchadnezzar is not coming accidentally. He is coming because you have provoked God not once, not twice, but continually for the history of Judah. That's the position of the Bible. God is not unjust. So the judgment is described, verse 8, thus says Yahweh of armies, that is Lord of hosts. Lord of hosts, technically in Hebrew, is Yahweh of the armies. The Zavot is a camp, a big camp, an army camp. And it is a dual kind of title. Lord of hosts is the greatness of God, the overarching sovereignty of God, but it's a military term. Everything in the Old Testament is focused that way. He is the great military king over the universe. He is very powerful. Because you have not heard my word, behold, I will send all the families of the north, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, my servant, in coming and taking Judah into captivity. He is serving my big purposes. The worst imaginable thing for Judah, but he is doing that as part of my big plan. And will bring against this land and its inhabitants and all the little nations around it. There it's talking about Moab and Ammon and Edom and so forth. Aram, Damascus, and will utterly destroy them too, make them a horror, an astonishment, a golly, oh my gosh, a hissing and perpetual desolations. Then up comes this number 70 years. Jeremiah 25:10. Moreover, I will take from them the voice of mirth, mirth being happiness, laughter, the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride, the sound of the millstones and the light of the lamp. Millstones making the flour to make the bread, and the light of the lamp to guide you. So the positive things, I will take away the good, and this whole land shall be a desolation and a horror. These nations, including Judah and the other little guys, will serve the king of Babylon 70 years. And so that is approximately, the 70-year period is approximately 605 BC to 536 BC. And so it's not from the 586 that the 70 years is reckoned. It's from when, and that's why Jeremiah 25 goes to very great lengths to give specific dates so we get the timing of that 70 years right. Most people, when they reckon the disappearance, the 70-year period, they assume that that began at 586, and that's not correct. It began 605. When the 70 years are complete, I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation for their iniquity. So they are serving my purposes. They are not my favorite. They're going to pay for what they've done too. They've got consequences coming to them too. I will make Babylon a perpetual desolation. I will bring on that land all my words pronounced against it, all that is written in this book. Chapters 50 and 51 are the condemnation of Babylon. We'll get to that eventually in a year or two, and we'll read about that, which Jeremiah prophesied concerning all nations. Again, remember, Jeremiah is all over the place. So really, intuitively, they would have put those chapters right beside this one. And so he could say, in the next little section, we're going to have the condemnation of Babylon, but it's down the ways. Which Jeremiah prophesied concerning all nations. For many nations and great kings shall be served by these punishments also. I will repay them according to their deeds and the works of their own hands. So why banishment from the land? Here's a possible explanation for the 70 years. We'll look at two little cross references here. Going back to Leviticus 25, Israel was commanded, and this is the commandment about, and this has to do with letting the land lie fallow, farming it 6 years, letting the 7th year it lie fallow and rest, giving the land Shabbat. It's also round, and that rolls into the year of Jubilee, the 49th year, 7 times 7, and then the next year is a year of rest and forgiving the debts. And there's no proof we have that they ever observed the year of Jubilee. Year of Jubilee is one of those things that was an ideal with an L, an ideal, like perfect scenario that because of human sin never really occurred, where people went back to the land that they belonged to, their debts and the reasons they sold their land were forgiven, and so forth. That never happened. I think the year of Jubilee is a concept that points towards heaven, and the eternal forgiveness of debts. But anyway, so what did Leviticus 25 verses 3 through 7 say? For 6 years you may plant your fields and prune your vineyards and harvest your crops. During the 7th year the land must have a Sabbath. Shabbat just means a rest. That's a verb for rest. There's several different words for rest, and that's one of them. A Sabbath year of complete rest. It is Yahweh's Sabbath. It is reflecting the nature of God. And as I said, I believe I said Sunday, rest in the Old Testament is equated with fellowship with God. While you're working during the week, you are working to take care of your business and your family. The Sabbath day is the day that you commune with God. You're not worried about the everyday, day-to-day grind. You're setting apart one Sabbath to know God. That's true rest. And as I said Sunday, it is rest that you can only get by communing with the Creator, the one who created you. It is knowing the purpose in your life. And same thing for the land. Do not plant your fields or prune your vineyards during that year. Do not store away crops that grow on their own or gather grapes from your unpruned vine. The land must have a year of complete rest. This applies to you, your servants, hired workers, temporary residents who live with you. Now, we know agriculture science confirms that this is a good practice, that the minerals that are in the soil are leached by the plants. And after a certain point, the soil dries out from nutrients, is not as productive. If you give it a year off, it will renew. It will renew itself. So what are the consequences?
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Do modern farmers do that? I have a friend that farms, and as far as I know, but he rotates his crops.
Yeah. Well, you can do similar things by rotating, and I don't know the science well. By rotating, say one takes out iron and another crop puts it back in. I don't know. I'm just making up something.
It's like wheat and soybeans and corn and stuff like that.
Yeah. And so I'm not good enough on the agricultural science to give you an answer. That is an idea where you have different sections and you rotate.
But modern farmers don't leave it fallow for a year, right?
They do not. I think they do it. Fertilizer, and so they chemically enhance the soil that way. Yeah, and so that's a pre-scientific way. It is a pre-scientific understanding of how to keep the ground nutrified. So what are the consequences of disobedience? It gets on at the end of that chapter 33 through 35. If you don't do this, I will scatter you among the nations and bring out my sword against you. Your land will become desolate, and your cities will lie in ruins. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? And this is in Leviticus, in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books. Then at last, the land will enjoy its neglected Sabbath years and lie desolate while you are in exile in the land of your enemies. So if you do not obey this command, and are disobedient in that way to not give your land the rest, then I will enforce this by taking you and scattering you among the nations so the land can be done. Now, I think this is literal. Obviously, we see a fulfillment of this in Jeremiah. I also think it is figurative. Go ahead.
Whenever written on Israel,
Uh-huh.
when it become desolate,
Yeah.
it refertilized itself while it was desolate. And then when it was repopulated again, what's it doing?
It's a marvel. And they have one of the first things that Israel did, they're leading the world in water conservation.
They have water for other countries.
They do. They sell water because they knew that because they had been laid siege to so much in their first 100, well, not quite 100 years yet, their first 50 years, they said if we do not recycle water, we can be besieged and we will die of thirst. Our nation, people will start dying of thirst. And so they lead the world in that, in a lot of things. It's fascinating, that modern nation of Israel. I think that this is a metaphor for our spiritual life. That the land growing crops and providing sustenance for us, and us disobeying and just wrenching out crops year after year without rotating, without letting the land life, is the same as us not reading our Bible and praying. What happens to the believer who does not read their Bible and pray? Like the land, they begin to get scattered among the nations. And the land is where we fellowship with God, where God provides for us metaphorically, symbolically. In the Old Testament, when he says the land, he's talking about that place where we go and be with God. And we are to go there and we are to rest. If we do not spend time with God, we'll be scattered among the nations. We will become captivated, enslaved by thought processes and philosophies that are not biblical, that are not godly, and we'll start acting like citizens of those far countries. And there will be an enforced penalty if we don't rest the land, if we do not Shabbat. And that is, I think that's for us too. We have to have time. Now, we are not bound by the Old Testament law as Christians. Jesus fulfilled the law. When we connect with the law through Jesus, and I think Jesus upped the bar. He's not saying once a week, rest and think about me. I think Jesus tells us to have Shabbat every day, to have time with him every day as we go. Have a Bible by your nightstand and read a little bit at night, or read in the morning, as you eat your cereal. I pray in my car every morning, etc. Like that. Spend time every day. The land will finally rest and enjoy the Sabbath it missed. As long as the land lies in ruins, it will enjoy the rest that you never allowed it to take every seventh year that you lived. Then when we get to Chronicles, the writer of Chronicles explains, and this is at the very end of Chronicles, this is the end of the Hebrew Bible. They have Chronicles last in their order, and this is kind of how it ends. The few who survived in Judah were taken as exiles to Babylon. They became servants to the king and his sons until the kingdom of Persia came to power. So the message of the Lord spoken through Jeremiah was fulfilled. The land finally enjoyed its Sabbath rest, lying desolate until the 70 years were fulfilled. And so 7 is the number for complete. A week is 7. That's one complete week, 7 days. And then 10, symbolically in the Old Testament, is like for emphasis. We might put exclamation points after something. We might say 7, exclamation point, exclamation point. That's complete. In the ancient times, they would make that number 70 to say 7 times 10 for real emphasis. So 7, I think that's the significance of. Every seventh year, you're supposed to let it lie fallow. And to emphasize all the Sabbaths that you have missed, you're going to have to be away for 7 times 10. And that's just a big number. Just as the prophet had said. So I think that's what's going on with the 70 years. Where are we at here? We are about halfway. So why don't we knock off there this week? Because I don't know. Would you rather knock off there or go really fast? Because I think we got 40 verses in this chapter. You got to go. Well, okay. Well, let's end there and say a prayer.